Hello, and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental nerds, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, Nic and I discuss being self-made. We talk to Toyin Ogunfolaju about leadership, leveraging your past, and slasher films. And finally, breaking stereotypes. Here are some fun facts about Nic's favorite airplane.
No, read it like it says. Read it like it says.
Oh, I have to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
My favorite airplane, the SR-71 Blackbird. First of all, it's the fastest jet ever, cruising at over Mach 3 or 228 miles per hour. It could operate
4 miles per hour. Oh my gosh, 2,000.
What did I say?
200.
Oh, holy smokes! Yeah,
it's the fastest plane at 200 miles an hour. Unbelievable. My foolproof plane is falling apart. Keep going about your favorite plane, Laura.
My favorite plane could operate safely at a maximum speed of Mach 3.3, which is over 2,284 miles per hour at an altitude more than 16 miles or 85,000 feet above the earth. Also, I swear I knew all of this before, and Nic did not write this. I think everyone knows what you're up to here. That's insane, though.
Yeah, it didn't work at all.
I know, even my brain was like 200. What? Yeah, I couldn't even read that as 2,000.
It both didn't work at all and worked perfectly. That's
that feels like going backwards. How can you physically go that fast?
I don't know. It seems like it should fall to pieces, but apparently it didn't. So how about that?
Awesome. Well, that may be my favorite airplane.
Yeah. Hit that music.
Hit that music. NAEP is hosting its next free webinar on climate justice on an international stage, prelude to COP28 and implications for industry, on December 15th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time and 8:30 a.m. Pacific Time. Join Chris Whitehead, Sunny Fleming, and Maya Carrasquillo for this informative event as they discuss what is climate justice, what actions are being taken on the topic, walk through a few case studies to show the importance of mapping these impacts, and plot a path forward to minimize the risk of the impacts. Check it out at www.naep.org. Well, now it's time for 30-second funny sponsor spot where Nic has 30 seconds to dazzle us with some hilarity. And if you would like to fill this spot with a blurb about your company, please contact us. And ready, set, go.
All right. I know, COVID, the pandemic is over. We're all commuting back to work. And I'm sure we're all tired of it, right? Laura, you're tired. You're so tired of commuting to work. And me too. I definitely don't work from home. That'd be ridiculous. But if you are tired of commuting, I have the perfect thing for you. We call it hyper lunch. And that's exactly what it sounds like. We take you, we put you out in your front yard. We pull back a large, incredible slingshot and shoot you to your job. That's right. You'll get there in record time. We guarantee that it'll be the fastest commute you've ever had in your life. But yeah. And we get lots of questions about this, like, will I die on impact? And probably, but that's, but you will get there way faster than you've ever done before. We promise, we guarantee that is our guarantee. And if it doesn't, you get your money back. How about that? How about that, Laura? How about that?
I'll take it. Does it go 2,284 miles per hour?
You know what? It's funny you should say that. It actually is the exact speed of the SR-71 Blackbird, Laura's favorite plane. So that makes perfect sense.
Sign up now for only $4 million a month.
Yeah. It's actually a little higher than that, but yeah. It's like $4 billion. I don't know how expensive.
Let's get to our segment.
Actually, so ironically, we're literally just talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I saw a clip of him and talking about how he doesn't like it when people say he's a self-made man. And he's like, yes, I came from nothing. I lived in a place that had no electricity, no running water. That's where I started. But self-made makes it seem like nobody helped me.
Yeah.
I just did it all by myself. And he's like, the concept is terrible. I had coaches, I had teachers, I had friends that got me to where I am. So to say I'm a self-made man would make me very unbelievably unappreciative of the people who actually helped me along the way. And I thought that was pretty wonderful. It was like a really sweet. I was like, oh my God.
He's one of my favorite people.
Yeah, that was really great. It was like, I was like, what? That's so poignant.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. But I think like semantics, right?
Yeah.
Self-made. I get it. I think we all understand that you didn't like.
Yeah, you're not literally self-made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, being self-employed for 7 years now, it is there's still, you have to believe in yourself. You have to be able to have relationships and get help and be helped and all of that. But there is a lot that just rides on you waking up every day and continuing to chase those dreams and be dedicated to whatever it is you're trying to get. So, you know, you're not self-made. You have to have other people in your court and you have to, you know, build partnerships and do things. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of people who do not succeed in the entrepreneur route because they don't have that self-made drive, you know, that they're going to do that because there are people helping you, but there's no one in the morning who's saying it's 7:30 time to get up and start rolling, you know.
That's so funny. I had no idea you would say that. And that's why I brought it up. I think drive's really important. That's something that's really kind of what I wanted to get to here. Yeah. Because, you know, talked about that a lot this past week too. It's being driven, you know, wanting to do more, learn more, be a better version of yourself, you know, trying to improve over time can be exhausting. And not everybody's designed to just be that way. I certainly feel like especially my younger years, I don't know what the heck I was doing. I kind of was rudderless, just kind of like, oh, okay, I guess I'll just do whatever it's telling me to do. And it took a long time for me to kind of pull myself out of that and I found something that was really worth, you know, being hungry about. And it just took a long time for me. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what your experience with that's like, but I feel like I've only known you for 3 years, but it feels like you've always been driven your whole life. I don't know if that's true or not. But.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've never, when I grew up, entrepreneur wasn't a word that was thrown around the way that it is now. Obviously, we didn't have social media where there's like pages I can follow with motivational quotes and famous people that I can tap into at any second. Arnold Schwarzenegger talking about, you know, self-made versus, you know, community made. Like those discussions weren't, if they were happening, they were private. They were not, you know, something that anyone could tap into. So I'm really interested to see like coming up generations, what they do with this. There's going to be the half that, you know, the bell-shaped curve, the half that does nothing. Yeah. And then the half that's just like going after it and has all of this tools and motivation and just knowledge, you know, that my friends' kids are saying things to them like, well, okay, mom, but you know, having a kid is hard. You just have to be self-aware around it. Like what 9-year-old knows what self-aware means? Like, not in my generation. Yeah. So, you know, it's really interesting. So I think we're all getting this information at the same time. And so, you know, I only started reading books, like business books, growth books, you know, when I started working for myself. I didn't do that when I was in my career as much. And gosh, I wish I had been reading, and some of these books didn't exist, but some of them did, you know, How to Win Friends and Influence People have been around forever. Like I didn't read that in my 20s. I read that in my late 30s. Right. Like I think that in the 4 Agreements, I mean, I read that all the time now. And it's like, you know, my personal like favorite book to stand on just to be stable and move forward. And I think that I forgot your question. I'm just rambling now. So
yeah. Like, no, I'll circle back on 2 things. Like one, I want to say like officially, it's like not everybody needs to be driven. Not everybody wants to do that kind of thing. And that's absolutely supremely okay. And you know, it's just funny because I kind of was always like, I'll just be like a middle of the road person. And then I just got more and more interested in learning more and more things about leadership and all those kinds of things. And you talk about books, and that's one of those things that I ask a lot of people like that I consider good leaders. What are the qualities that you have? What are the qualities you look for in your team? All those things. And like, so I've read leadership books. I have done that. I haven't done as much, but that's the thing a lot of people really like. And for me, I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I should be reading these, you know, more of these books. I've read some and been like, yeah, that's good advice. And I'll remember 3 of the 75 things that are in it. And you know, the rest will be back in there somewhere, I guess. But I don't know. Like that's always kind of interesting. How do we?
Well, I'm going to shamelessly plug my book club because the Wildebeest Publishing High Impact Reading Challenge. For the last 4 years, we've read a book every month. And this year, we are coincidentally reading Breaking Ice and Breaking Glass, Leading in Uncharted Waters by Vice Admiral Sandra Stowe's retired, who was a guest on our show before. Right. And she's going to come to our meeting. So super excited about that. So Nick, you should come November 30th. Just come regardless. The book club is really like, so it's my business consulting friend, Lisa Sears, and I started it because her and I were like, you need to read this, you need to read this, you need to read it. And then we had a long list of like book shares. And then we were just like binge reading, but no follow up. So just like exactly what you said, remembering 3 things from it. So we come and we all discuss what we learned, what we did like, what we didn't like. And then some people who didn't read it can go, oh, I think I need to read this. Or someone else can say like, oh, I'm glad I didn't read that one. But yeah, I think that's really elevated a lot. And what you asked me before was if I've always been like this. Mm-hmm. Because I only discovered like probably 3 years into my working for myself that light bulb, like, oh my God, I always have been an entrepreneur. I've always, when I was 18, I started, like I was building websites. I was starting this book. I wanted to put together a resource that would allow nonprofits that were wildlife refuges to have some place where they could have a list people could go to and see like what donations do they need, what's their cause. I had this whole questionnaire and a lot of them wrote back to me. And then I was 18, I didn't finish it, but like, and then the internet also was born. So like my book idea became like what you would put on your website. So like it never occurred to me, like, why am I unhappy in my 9-to-5 job? Because I've always wanted to create, you know?
Yeah. Oh, it's so funny. And you know, looking back for me too, it's small things like, you know, there's TV shows like one of my favorites for growing up is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? Loved it. And everybody has a favorite, right? Everybody has a favorite. And I'm like one of 7 total people who likes Leonardo. And I liked him not just because he had swords, but also because he was a leader. And Sam was not pointing to her.
I know, Sam.
But like, you know, people always assume I like the smart one because I was a smart person. And I'm like, no, I like him. He's got swords and he's blue and he's, I don't know, he's cool. He's leading. He's, you know, and you kind of don't think about that until you're like later in life. You're like, why did I liked Cyclops and X-Men again because he's the leader guy. And nobody likes him. Not a soul likes him. It's weird. So, like, actually, ironically, I remember when the movies came out, I'm like, no, he's supposed to be the leader. Why did they make him such a wimp? And that was very disappointing to me. But yeah, you kind of start thinking about that. I was like, oh yeah, I guess I've always wanted to be like that. It's just, yeah, I never thought about it that way at all until I was in my 30s. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess that's kind of
yeah. And you can be driven at whatever. You can be driven to be a great leader in your job. You can be driven to be a business owner of yourself. Like, but that drive,
or be
I think, is
teacher or mentor or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But I think some people lose the drive because they're not in the place they want to be. Mm-hmm. You know, they're either like doing something that other people encourage them to do, their parents, their community, whatever, just like whatever those expectations are. And then they may think they're not a driven person, but maybe they're just not in the right space.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, Tiff is a great example of that, you know, having her on the show a couple of times. Perfect example.
Yeah.
He's extremely driven.
Right. Yeah. And as far as like career coaching goes, like if you find yourself in that position where you're like, how come I don't want to go to work? How come I'm not working as hard as everyone else? Or how come I don't have the drive that Nic has? You know, I'm also a manager leader, but I'm not putting in the effort. Like maybe you're just not in the right field or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be. Unless you're Sam, because she is in the right spot, right? That's all right, Sam?
Well, she's pretty driven. I can't. No complaints there.
Not even a little. I like it. All right, that's good. we should end before I get myself in more trouble.
Right. Awesome. Let's get to the interview.
Hello and welcome back to EPR. Today we have Toyin Ogunfolaju, the Director of Social Value and Equity Americas at Jacobs, on the show. Welcome, Toyin.
Thanks for having me. Okay,
so you have a long, distinguished career here, a lot of really interesting things. But what was it like working with lobbyists who were advocating for lawmakers in Maryland? I want to start there.
Oh my God, nothing easy. So that was very interesting. So I worked for, it was actually a law firm. So on top of the lobbying piece, it was the actual law firm. And I even got kind of connected to that law firm because my mom worked for one of the partners' wives, because I really wanted to go to law school. I thought like this was going to be my jam. And so I was there for about 6-7 years and kind of started off as almost kind of a paralegal kind of a role. Mm-hmm. Gopher, some people might call that, it as well. Yeah. And, but really over those 6 years, I asked for more responsibilities. And so got exposed to like, not only the legislative process, but then like the people, the personalities, the deals, the things that are how the sauce gets made. So that was interesting. And then the actual team that I worked with, I was the only woman on the team, the government relations team, and that it was in Annapolis. And the youngest person by 20 years. And then, and then the only woman of color, right? So that was an interesting experience. It was all dudes, 40 something plus years old, and let's just say
it's your first job, right?
It was my first professional job.
Wow!
It's my first professional job. Yeah, so very scary, right? Because you're like, first of all, these people know a lot more than me than I'll ever know. And I started when I was 19, right? So it was that fear. And I was originally born in Nigeria. And so growing up and came to the US when I was 3 years old. And so from a Nigerian family, growing up in the US in Maryland, where I grew up, there's always this fear of law and the law. And So I don't even know how I was even attracted to any of these things, because I just felt like every day I was like, is this the day that they're going to say I can't come back, or right. So I don't know how I got attracted to law, but it was a great experience. I think it's kind of what has helped define like my approach to the work I do today, and how to engage with people, how to treat people in a fair and decent way.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing some of that up too, because that intimidation factor. I remember very specifically my first job, similar kinds of like, what am I doing? How do they know so much? And we've talked a little bit on the show about imposter syndrome, where it's like, more than you think. So did you kind of, by the time you had finished there, do you feel like you had a better sense of yourself in that industry, or was it time to move on and let's just go do something different? Yeah.
So a couple of things, yes and no. Let's start with the no part. I actually had decided I was in the process of starting community college, or was in community college when I started at the firm. And then I just got very distracted, and I didn't really finish. I started some classes. I didn't really finish my undergraduate degree. And so because I got to a point in time where I kept raising my hand and hoping that they would treat me as like an equal, and they didn't see me as a gopher, even though it was like 6 years later, I decided in order for me to kind of be able to have options in the future, I needed to, number one, get a degree. And so I literally quit to focus on school full time. And so for like 3 or 4 semesters in a row, I took like 5 or 6 classes. I bartended and served and whatnot. So I felt like leaving that experience, that like I understood myself. I just knew that I felt like I was missing things, but I wasn't going to get it here. So in that regard, I guess I knew that much, right? That this wasn't going to be where I find myself. But yeah, it was time to go.
Yeah. I mean, that does take a good amount of self-awareness, which I think when we're younger, sometimes we miss. And so you go to school, you're bartending, which sounds like all you're doing is being on your, engaged 24/7. How was that process for you? How did you work your way through it?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine.
A lot of fun. Let me just say that from the jump. And like you said, very good observation. It was a lot of engagement. It was, listening to people, talking to people one-on-one. And I'd never bartended before, right? So I also was learning like how to bartend and be a server. So, getting dropped at a section that had like 50 people and having never served before. I think I almost got fired the first serving job I had because none of the tables left me any tips at all, like that whole entire shift. And it was like the first shift after the training, and you're like, I got it. And it was like none of the tables gave me any tips. So I got pulled to the side by the manager and was basically like, look, we'll let you come back tomorrow, but like after tomorrow, if you don't get it together, we're going to have to let you go. So of course I had a cry session, and again, self-doubt, right? Just kind of oh my God, what am I doing with my life? I can't even do a side gig.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, so that was, it was hard because the number of class, right? So then the school piece, right? You're taking 5 classes. This was the most number of classes I'd taken. It was a lot of pressure I had put on myself because I had a timeline. I don't come from money. So, literally the money I was earning was, the money I was been using to pay for school and living expenses. And I didn't want to be out of work too long. Like I had given myself like a year to get it together and come out with a degree. So if I hadn't kind of like stuck to the timeline, it would have set me back and, who knows what.
Right.
So that was the bartending and the serving, but also I had created a network, right? Having worked at firm and doing lobbying, had created a network of friends and people, professionals who worked in all sorts of sectors and markets. And then specifically, one of my contacts relative to transportation said, "Hey, one of the agencies here is looking for someone to kind of be their like project manager, coordinator person for they're doing changes to their service. And they need someone who can do community engagement and also kind of herd the cats with the, the engineers and the technical folks." And so I was like, sure, why not?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is, but yeah, let's give it a try. I'm starting to master the bartending thing, so I think I can throw on another challenge. And then I started working for Maryland Department of Transportation for several years thereafter.
Yeah. So okay. So walk us through a little bit about your career path after you get your degree. Yeah. How did you go about getting a new job, and how did you get to where you are now?
So that role I had mentioned was actually like funded through a grant. So it was kind of, I didn't know what consulting, I had no idea what consulting was until I actually started working for a consulting firm. But you would say it kind of was like a consulting gig, right? They were paying me through a grant. So yeah, I started working with this agency, and this particular part of the agency focused on providing transportation for people with disabilities.
Oh yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess I think I did a decent job because they hired a new director of that unit, and he decided that he wanted to employ me as an actual state employee. And so he named me as a manager in operations for the Maryland Transit Administration. And so I focused on managing the dispatch of vehicles and operators. That was a whole kind of subunit of the operations. There's a whole certification office. There's a call center. So yeah, that's kind of how I, number one, got myself in the public sector, and then being in transportation. So I would say transportation has had a significant role in kind of how my career has been shaped and the things I've been exposed to. So yeah, that's kind of the second kind of chapter, right?
Yeah.
The legislative piece, right? The law, the legislative executive branch. And then now I was, in the public sector as a manager in operations. And quite frankly, I think I'm so grateful for that experience. Because what I saw was, on the legislative side, on the policy side, there are all these policies that, whether, said elected official or whoever in charge decided that this was kind of the way that our agency is going to kind of move forward. And I felt like what I was observing now that I was in the operations on the ground, that these policies were being developed without having talked to the people who actually are there to implement. And so it was just kind of a rude awakening for me that this is my calling. I spent those 6-7 years kind of understanding maybe what typically people don't understand as far as the laws, regulations, and the policy piece, which we have to have, right?
Of course.
Otherwise, we'd all kind of go kind of crazy, left to our own devices. But then we were missing the real people on the ground who work the overtime or come in early and deal with the customers or deal with the constituency on a regular basis. And so I just feel like what I do now is about trying to make those kind of parts of the house fit together.
Yeah. And it's such a great point. And I was going to make a joke about it, but no, it's totally true. It's
totally make a joke. You should totally make a joke. Tell me tell me the joke.
It's like, oh, you're telling me that the laws and policies we make don't necessarily always reflect the real world. That's so crazy. Who knew?
I know.
Yeah, right.
I know.
But it's totally the world we live in. I know. It's absolutely kind of speaking my language. I love that because it's right in line with we have a lot of environmental policy changes happening now. And some of the changes are happening for lots of different reasons. And some of those reasons make sense and some of them don't. And it's kind of it's really fun to have that extra piece too, where you're like, oh, I understand what happened. I can read it. Or you read legal documents oh, the lawyer that wrote this was having a bad day. I can tell because of how this was written. You know what I mean?
Correct. And or how quickly it got passed, right? They were just all we got it. Yeah. Because if it doesn't, there's so many errors. Or that it got passed so quickly and that was a priority, right? Versus things that are maybe not priorities that take, years and years and decades, right? To kind of work through. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So that means, after we'll get a beer and tell stories. That's what that means.
I've got a plenty.
Right. I don't know. But let's talk a little bit about your job now too. So
Yeah.
what is your day-to-day job like as Director of Social Value and Equity?
So I work for, so Jacobs is at the heart of it, and our marketing people will be upset with me when I say this, but I have to say this. We are a total solutions professional services consulting firm. But what that really means is that our company was founded in architecture, engineering, construction management type of professionals. And we've got contracts, federal, state, local contracts,
Right.
government contracts, and private sector contracts. So we provide a myriad of services for clients. So in terms of my role, we've had for decades and decades professional practitioners who, whether they're in water or they're in doing work in the transportation space or doing work in the what we call built environment space, so buildings, right, who bring a certain aspect of social equity or environmental justice or workforce development, equity, diversity, right, to the table. And again, these practitioners are not just community engagement folks. I mean, these are scientists, these are economists, right? These are folks who are like super geeky map GIS people. These are folks who are really great at strategy, helping clients develop strategy. But we've had these different practitioners across what we call the Americas. For us, it's the US and Canada, is the Americas. And so we didn't have within our organization, our company, we're a global firm, in the Americas, we didn't have kind of a structure. Like we didn't have a department that focused on identifying and developing the folks who are practitioners, right? And kind of creating a career path for folks who do this type of work. We have a direct understanding of if you're an engineer, a junior engineer, how you can eventually become, right, the senior engineer. Right. We have kind of a direct correlation between someone who works in the water resource space and so how eventually, right, you could ascend into different roles, but we don't have that for those who are really interested in being the social economic inclusion or social equity practitioners. And so in the last year, working with our senior leadership, develop a business case for why it's smart for us to develop basically a business unit that focuses on not only developing the talent, but then as we are delivering the engineering stuff or the science stuff, the environmental stuff, that we're really thinking kind of big picture of how our projects and our programs impact the community and trying to be as proactive about mitigating harms, trying to undo harms, and trying to create the most community benefits.
That's really cool. That sounds super great. And we're totally nerdy on the show. Freely will admit this. So I want to know, okay, that's the broad picture. So specifically, how does that look for Jacobs? What have you guys worked on and what is the structure now?
Yeah. So I've got I'm the director for the Americas, and we've got two regions, East and West. We've named a director for our East and looking for a director for our West region. And so what does this look like? So we, for example, I'm not going to name the client, but there is a particular pursuit actually that we're working on now, but they're looking at replacing a tunnel. And so we are pursuing work with that. A significant piece of the replacement of this tunnel is to be cognizant of the community that surrounds this tunnel, because this is going to be a pretty big deal to replace a tunnel that, quite frankly, is a thoroughfare, right? A really main artery for the service. And so how do you replace this, do the technical stuff, right? Making sure that safety is at the forefront, making sure that you build a tunnel that's going to, last. But then for a community that may not even really they use more of the local transit system. How do you convince them that as you're doing this program, replacing this tunnel, that you're going to be conscientious of potential environmental challenges, right? So, as construction goes on, air quality, right? The length of construction, we know through many studies that, long-term exposure to the construction environment does things to us from a mental standpoint. We know if something impacts you mentally, it'll impact you physically, right? And there's the circle of life. And so we, as we're pursuing this work, our proposal, I can't tell you everything in the proposal because that will help our competitors. But ultimately, what we would But ultimately, what we, as far as our proposal to the client, ultimately we're saying, hey, we're really sound technically. We know how to do this replacement. Here's how we'll replace the tunnel over such and such years. But also, while we're doing that, we are also creating a workforce development program so that the local residents can also get hired and actually work on this program. We're not only just hiring those local residents for the jobs, whether those are in jobs for today, into the future, especially energy transition type of skills, we're creating that capacity, but we're also, making sure that we are engaging the community in a way that we're exposing the next generation of future engineers or future scientists. Yeah. We're really looking into making sure that the materials that we use are sustainable materials. We're looking at, because you think about big picture global things, right? For example, the UN, United Nations, has done a pretty big undertaking in identifying 17 goals globally for sustainable development. And so we need to be cognizant of that as we're hopefully delivering this tunnel replacement, how the goals on the project roll up to that bigger global view. So our work, the social value and equity team, would be really looking at from day one of this program, from the planning to the delivery piece, how the community needs to be part of this program. The jobs piece, the community engagement, the inclusive engagement piece, right? So really hearing from the community and taking the feedback and applying it to how we deliver the program is going to be very, very important here.
Oh, it's so great. I love to hear that too. And I think one of the things you hit on that I want to kind of follow up on too. So you're talking about a community who's engaged in a project and has an incentive to be supportive because you are engaging the community. That's so cool to see because it gives them a sense of ownership. Correct. Is that kind of where that's coming? The idea came from?
Correct. And the idea of co-creation, the idea of co-design. One of my mentors, the quote or the thing she'd always say to me that just sticks with me: people support that which they help create, right? Yes. And so in order for this program to be successful, for this tunnel replacement to be not just a tunnel replacement, we need the community to understand why it's going to be a benefit to them, even if they aren't quite literally Amtrak users, right? That this is a community development program. This is a way that they might be able to get some of that infrastructure that doesn't necessarily exist today. This is a way in which individual residents of the community can be trained or upskilled or reskilled for jobs in the future, and not just jobs for the sake of having a job, but actually like careers. So our job is to, number one, message that effectively, right? And then actually do it.
Right. So, okay, there's two parts there, right? So to message effectively, I mean, what have you found to be the best way to reach communities about big projects like this?
Yeah. So first thing is first, make no assumptions, right? So make no assumptions that everyone's got a smartphone and that, sending out email blasts are going to get to anyone. Make no assumptions that even if you printed the thing or you sent the QR code or whatever kind of means of kind of letting people know, you're going to be doing a town hall or something like that, understanding that there's history, that there are traumas, right? And so being ready for listening to that feedback period, like this is even before we even get to the part about the program or the project that we're delivering, that there is history here. Folks have probably come before and said, oh, we're going to build this and we're going to do that. And you're going to be that much more better. We're going to create this many jobs. And then it never happened. So understanding that, and being humble, and then having those tough conversations, and then really building into the process and some level of accountability, right? So we're not just scheduling town halls and saying we want to hear from you, and then we do nothing with that feedback, making sure that with our even just contracts that we have with the client, there's milestones, there's reporting, there's ways in which we're basically checked on the promises that we made and making sure that we live up to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's great. And that's an absolutely wonderful approach to this. And I think in my career too, I've seen so many examples of community project's going well and going poorly. And almost always it starts at the very, very beginning, making poor assumptions and not following through. So, and that was the second half of what you said, right? So it's not just, talking the talk, but walking the walk. So how do you follow through with what you promise?
Yeah. So it's like you think about making like a cake or something. You have to bake it into the batter, right? You don't sprinkle it on top like, oh, look, we're done building the thing. And so we just add sprinkles and everybody should be good, right? So it's about identifying like early on in that kickoff meeting, that first meeting, to talk about how we're all going to, get along and do stuff and how we're going to communicate to one another, identifying metrics, key performance metrics, right? So a key performance metric might be that in the design phase, you are going to go above and beyond what the regulations say about how to engage the community, right? So the regulation might say that you only have to do 3 outreach events.
Right.
No. 3 is like bare minimum. You actually need to do X number, and this is how. And then the scale and or the versatility of those engagements, right? Virtual options versus in-person options. That we're going to actually, so for example, that are the small diverse businesses who we could bring onto our team, right? Who themselves, who are residents of the community, who have skill sets that we need on this program, hiring them onto our team, right? That's another kind of way to keep this very community focused. And then at the end of the day, making sure that we are spending time in the community. I'm saying well beyond even this program and project, right?
Yes.
So being kind of genuine to the process, which is why it's important that our teams be local, right? That we're not flying folks in, right, to kind of have the expertise and then fly out. That there are actually people who live and, like myself, have grown up in the community.
All right, and I think that's a great point. It's like I work for a Native Hawaiian company. I used to live in DC, but if I flew from DC to Honolulu and I wore a 3-piece suit, they'd tell me to turn around and go right back. It's something you have to understand your community. It's a before, during, and after. And I love that you said that. That's so great. So I'm glad to hear it. That's really great work. I'm really impressed with all the work that we were talking about today. And one of the things I want to dive in on you specifically is about your leadership. I think, we're talking a little bit about like what you do, but you've taken many leadership roles in your careers. It sounds like you've had lots of different unique hats. So what advice would you have for people who are trying to become good leaders? What do you see as a good, you mentioned your mentors. What do you look for in leaders?
Yeah, I say, so I'll say one thing and then I'll talk about one thing I learned not to do.
Perfect.
So I say, and I'm just thinking about right now in my company, we're doing kind of a reorganization. And so a lot of people feel and things are happening, and there's a lot of side messages and big picture messages. People are kind of coming up with their own narrative. There's like a moment of uncertainty. And what I noticed though in moments of uncertainty is that it's harder in moments of chaos, uncertainty. It's harder to pretend like you're something that you're not. So it's like, this is where you kind of find out kind of who people really are.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so what I've learned is that you got to be genuine. You got to be authentic, whatever that is. So if you got to go find yourself to figure out kind of what you are, who you are, go do it. However you got to do it, do the weekend getaway or, do your daily meditation, whatever works for you, you do you, boo. But at the end of the day, you should be who you are, because if you pretend to be someone in order to either get a role or to give people the impression that you are that leader that you're not, like they're just going to, that facade either over time or very instantaneously will just crumble, and it'll just be hard. Like that's a lot of stuff to keep up inside too. You know what I mean? It's like not telling the truth or being it, right? You got to figure out and remember who you lied to and when, and what, right? Just be you. So that's one. Right. And one thing I learned early on from someone I thought was a mentor, and so you got to kind of be careful, like who you call a mentor, was what not to do. This particular woman, mentor, she was the head of said team or group, and she was notorious for having meetings in which, she'd be pounding her fist on the table, dropping F-bombs, and instilled fear. And people performed, I guess, but they performed out of fear as opposed to performing for her in order to, because they stood behind, right, kind of like
what they were
her as
doing.
a leader. It was more about fear of getting fired or fear that they were going to get yelled at. And so I learned a couple of things. One, if that was what I needed to be or how I needed to behave in order to be a woman leader, I was like, this isn't meant for me. Like I should probably figure out something else right now.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Like, it's not going to go down like that. But then also that I quickly understood that, hey, I don't need to critique this particular leader because, hey, she's coming from a generation in which if you didn't sound like this, because it was all male dominated, if you sounded, quote unquote, kind of like how a woman sounds, right? Gentle, and that you were going to get swallowed up, right? You weren't going to get taken seriously. They wouldn't view you as a leader, and they certainly weren't going to, ask you to take on a leadership role. And so she was really kind of just mimicking behaviors that were more developed for survival than they were about, creating a certain sort of a legacy, a more positive legacy. So I kind of need to kind of humble my observation a bit from that standpoint. But it also taught me just, sometimes you can learn things from people from what you shouldn't do standpoint. So I knew very quickly that I needed to make sure that whatever spaces I was in, they weren't fostering that type of behavior, right? That wasn't the way that I was going to survive, and could quickly kind of evaluate if I needed to be like that in order to survive, then this isn't the place for me.
Right. And I want to say, like, I think you also, in your answer, understanding where someone's coming from, even when they're angry, is really, that's a great skill to have. And not everybody else can have that perspective. And I think that's a really great observation on your part, because it's easy to say, oh, that person's a jerk, they're just mean. I just think that I'm curious to kind of to a fault sometimes, because it's like everything's like, but why? And like my theory, but why? It wasn't enough for me to just kind of go like, oof, like I saw that person is terrible. It was kind of like, there's a reason for this, right? Like, I don't think people just genuinely wake up out of bed and kind of go like, and here's how I'm going to be terrible. I think there's an explanation for it, right? And so curiosity, I would say, is probably one of my stronger suits or whatever. But right. Yeah, that's so cool. I love it. That's something I say too. I always tell people to be curious. Just be curious. You find a lot more answers being curious than you'd know without it. Answers
and understanding, right? So we don't have to be resigned to what it is that you understood a situation to be, but like at least you understand. It doesn't.
You don't have to like it. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to
like it.
Understand it. Yeah, you understand it. That's very cool. So as somebody coming up, like a young professional in the career, is there any advice that you would give younger folks on ways to where we talked about, trying to understand who you are as a person, but like, that next step for you to go from like that junior level to you're starting to get some experience. Do you have any advice for folks kind of transitioning from just starting out to kind of becoming that full leader?
Yeah. And this is, for those who are seeking to be in those like management leadership type of roles. And that's not for everyone. So that's also a thing too, right? Understanding too, right? If you're happy with learning a particular craft and just being the smartest person in the whole world about that craft, and you're happy with that, and you don't need to be kind of, ascending into other roles, you do you, right? Like, that's great. Wonderful. Yeah. The sooner you figure that out, the more heartache, right? But for those who are looking to, lead, those who are looking to manage, to those who are looking to kind of influence organizations, I would say invest in ways in which you can be a more rounded professional. I talked about, knowing a particular craft and being the best at it, but that's one thing, right? Like, definitely find skills, hone your skills. I value those who actually have skills versus folks who just kind of walk around kissing babies and shaking hands. So have skills. It's important to have skills. There should be things you're good at. Yes. Good, great, wonderful, master that. But then also things like I knew when I started my career, I just would raise my hand for things. And they were things that weren't necessarily like about a particular craft or skill. They were about being in front of people and being in new groups of people. I mean, think about when I worked in the lobbying part of my career, where, we would host events pretty regularly for different types of organizations, different parts of our different stakeholder groups. And I would be walking into rooms in which like I knew no one. But through that process, I learned how to talk and engage. I learned how to listen, even if every conversation wasn't the most interesting conversation that I could ever have, right?
Right.
I volunteered in like professional organizations. In the back of your mind, you're like, oh, no one's paying me to do this. Well, it's a good idea for you to kind of pick and choose specific organizations that you want to kind of spend some time growing. So that'll help grow your network. And then you start to hopefully develop relationships outside of your organization for that vantage point. It's always good to have different perspectives, right? And kind of be able to hear from other people in different walks of life. So I would say go outside your comfort zone, raise your hand for things that don't necessarily like exactly align to your job today, right? Stay curious, make sure that you are also along the way identifying mentors, champions, sponsors. It's also very important. Mentors are great for sure, but your mentors are not always the folks who are going to have that power or that influence in an organization to get you that next interview, or that for someone to consider you for that next, or be on the list of people from a succession planning standpoint. So it's important to also familiarize yourself with those within your organization who have power and influence, and get to know them a little bit. So again, as you're ascending, you need those types of folks to be talking about you when you're not in the room. And depending on their level of power influence, they could be the person who picked you for a job that you didn't think that you were capable and qualified for, right? So just being mindful of the mentor, sponsorship, and champion, and those three are definitely important to have in your network.
Yeah, I mean that's all great advice. And so I have to brag about you just a little bit here before we close out. We have to give you congrats on your recognition from the Women of Color magazine.
Yes,
got to do that. So.
Thank you.
Just give us a quick overview. Tell us about the magazine, the award, and what led to the recognition.
Yeah, so Women of Color magazine specifically focus on women of color in STEM as a whole. And every year they do a conference. And they've been doing this for almost 28 years. I think this might have been the 29th year. And so every year there's like a slew of different awards, from technologists awards to diversity, equity, inclusion leaders, kind of you name it. Community involvement, like kind of you name it, they have different awards. And so the award that I was given was relative to corporate responsibility. So they gave out 2 of those awards this year to myself and another awardee. And so it was really a reflection of the work I think I've been doing for most of my career, right? Yeah. Which is how do you take the business side of things and then connect that to the civic engagement side of things, and then connect that also to things that are, I would say, government regulatory, right? And try to bring those together in a way that there are better outcomes for our community. So that conference happened in Detroit a few weeks ago. That was awesome. I brought my sister with me.
That's really cool.
They called it a digital twin conference because that meant that the conference was happening in person, but that folks could also stream it online. So I was able to go up and give my acceptance speech and give a shout out to my family as they were actually watching me and whatnot. So
that's so cool.
That was super cool experience. Yeah.
That's incredible. Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. That's a really awesome experience. I'm glad. Again, congratulations for that. Well deserved, I would say. So, yeah, of course. And, naturally we have to close out the interview talking about, maybe, was it horror movies? Maybe.
Oh my goodness.
So,
the week of Halloween. Why not?
I know. Why not? Right. I mean, it's so funny. Laura and I love horror movies. We like movies. We like music.
Nice.
Too, but what are some of your favorites? What do you like and why?
Yeah. So I'm not going to, it's just like you're putting me in a corner here. So there's just a couple of staple ones for me. Michael Myers. So that's Halloween for anyone
Halloween.
who doesn't know about Michael Myers. The whole Halloween series, Nightmare on Elm Street. So Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
And then Friday the 13th, Jason. So those are kind of like the three staple ones. And then there's a lot of other campy ones, which, you know, I don't want to call them one-hit wonders, but you know what I mean? Like they wasn't a series, but if you brought it up, I would know and I would be able to tell you about that one scene. So there's a whole lot more, but those three are the ones that kind of jump out at me.
That's so fun. Yeah, those. Yeah. So slashers. You like the good slashers.
Slashers.
Yeah.
Exorcist.
Oh,
my brothers would be so mad at me if I hadn't mentioned Exorcist. Exorcist. Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yep.
It's okay. So we did this thing once where like we just decided to watch like every Halloween movie there was. You know, like all the Michael Myers in a row. And so you're watching them. You're not really paying attention because you know after the second one, you're kind of like, well, these are all kind of silly. It's on the background. And they use the music, right?
Yes.
In the fourth one, they literally go doo doo doo, and they psych you out with the music. It is so.
You're
funny.
Right. Oh my gosh, you're so. Oh, you're okay. You're good. Yep.
So,
I know exactly.
I
know exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about. You kind of pause. You're like,
wait, what just happened?
What are they doing? Yeah. What are they doing? They're doing something different. They're switching it up.
Right. And it was so funny because like our entire party just like totally stopped and everyone was like, wait, did they just lie to us? And that's why I love them. Those are so fun. So
I haven't really kept up with the newer kind of horror films because I just haven't. I mean, there's some good ones out there, but I just have like this very discrete 80s, early 90s time frame that I'm captured in that time frame.
Yeah. That's too funny. I was wondering if you'd know. Wow. Okay. Yeah. You're legit. That is the legit 80s, 90s. Like, you can't not know that. So yeah, Toyin, the real deal, 100%. So we are wrapping up. We'll do two more questions before you go. So is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to say before we sign off?
Well, I would be remiss. I think I mentioned him, but I'm so in love with my 3-year-old right now. I mean, he's not every moment of the day because he's still a 3-year-old, but like he's getting to where he's doing the potty training thing and he's like forming full sentences and he's like he says stuff like, "Oh my gosh," and I'm like, "Wait, what?
What? Where did you even?" Yeah.
So I just want to give a little shout out to my 3-year-old, who's my COVID baby. I found out actually kind of like the week before we all kind of had to stay home. Before is when I found out that I was pregnant. So I was like, how am I going to in a pandemic? What?
Yeah.
I mean, the lucky thing is no one got to see me like blow up. I mean, they saw the face on Zoom. They saw the face and they were figured they probably were like, oh, she's just eating extra like everyone else.
Like everyone else. Right? Yeah.
The COVID-20. But, you know, no one got to see.
That is too funny.
My waistline expand.
Yeah. So we'll have you back to do the benefits of COVID, and that's
I didn't have to have like one of those weird, you know, the 2 baby showers where I have to like open presents and take pictures.
Right.
So I got to skip over all of that. That's great.
That's so great. Well, this has been really, really great. Really enjoyed it. Last but not least, if people do want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I am on the LinkedIn, but they can for sure send me an email. I definitely welcome that. So email is Toyin, Toyin .Ogunfolaju, OGU, N as in Nancy, F as in Frank, OLAJU @Jacobs, JACOBS.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being on.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's been good.
That's our show. Thank you, Toyin, for joining us today. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Bye.
See you, everybody.